Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a discussion session about recovery for Bideford and the future of our town centre. And thank you all so much for joining us on this. It's Tuesday evening. There we go. Momentary pause. Thank you to everyone for muting yourselves. There are sort of over 20 people on the call at the moment. This is not me being regimented. Just need to make sure that we've not got too much sound interference. I'm going to be monitoring the participants throughout. If you want to talk, please just raise a hand and we'll try and get to you as soon as we can. There is the chat function that's activated. Please make sure that throughout the discussions that you're using that chat. But as always, please keep it polite, keep it positive, and keep it respectful. And we will have certain differences of opinion, but that's great. Hopefully that will be constructive and move us forward to a brighter place. I'm delighted to welcome this evening Ben Stevenson, who has worked with a number of us before in his role as within the Institute of Place Management. Ben is with us today as an independent consultant, but brings with him a wealth of knowledge, experience, and connections that it's great to have on board. Ben, over to you.
Thank you so much. It's very, very kind of you. And also, I bring with me a great love of Bideford. It's quite a newfound love. I've only visited the town twice. I was here last year with the IPM. Back this year, I visited on a particularly sunny day, and it was almost impossible to see anything wrong with it. Maybe there isn't anything wrong with it. Let's see if we can find out tonight. Chris, you said before if people could raise their hand, I would suggest probably if you wanted to raise your hand to talk, maybe use the function of raising your hand because it's much easier to spot than if you're waving your hand around. So you've got sort of lots of people here tonight. So thanks so much for having me and for also sharing your beautiful town with me. I have got a bit of experience in places. I'm a fellow of the Institute of Place Management. And I've been working in places all across the UK for many years, about 20 years now, with a background in business improvement districts and also I ran a street market for a time, which is a sort of transformative thing. It changed the local economy for the better. I'm really involved in neighbourhood planning. I get involved with new developers, with local authorities, all sorts. And the sort of basic function that I provide is to try to understand a little bit about local economies and advise on how local economies could improve. So as you might imagine, I've been pretty busy recently on the sort of COVID recovery stuff. And having been appointed to the High Streets Task Force as an expert, I'm sort of working with all sorts of different places. So that's a bit of background from me. Just I'm hoping this isn't going to be massively provocative tonight. I'm going to bring you some of the learnings that I've sort of brought with me, but the agenda is basically Chris is going to start off with a bit of an overview about what's going on at the moment in Bideford and what the future holds a little bit for Bideford, some of which you will be, I'm sure, aware of, but some of you may not be. Then we're going to have a quick recap of some of the vital and viable work that we did last year, not too focused on that, but really looking forward from that. Then we're going to look a little bit about what's changed with coronavirus, and throughout all of this, we'd like you to put your hand up and participate if you can. I've got some examples of how different places are managing recovery, really focusing on smaller towns, just to sort of give you some ideas about how recovery might work in Bideford. Then we're going to look at the sort of barriers to success, the action planning process itself. So really, it's a sort of quick and dirty action plan. It's not going to be a sort of a report that gathers dust on a shelf for years and years and years. You've all seen many of those, I'm sure. And then we'll sort of go into the next steps. So this was the day that I arrived. This photo, you can see how gloriously sunny it is. So Chris, I'm going to hand over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you. I think it's really exciting to be having this discussion about the future of Bideford. Because there's a lot going on and there's a lot of positives. We know that there are challenges. We know there are all sorts of things that still need working on collectively. But for those of you who've not been aware, we've recently submitted our Future High Street Fund submission for Bideford. So if you haven't already signed up for information, I would really, really, really ask anyone who's interested in regeneration, which you guys are because you're on this call, to go to bidforbideford.co.uk, and I'll put that in the chat in a minute, and just sign up to be kept informed, because that could be an incredibly transformative project for the heart of Bideford, and in fact for the entire town and surroundings. We then know that couples with Brunswick Wharf and the opportunities that presents as well, the two projects working in tandem. And also, before sort of people start saying, well, it's making the most of other assets that we've got in the town. So how, for example, do we bring bridge buildings back to life? There's a lot of work going on that. And equally, how do we make the most of the pannier market, which I know that within the town council, there's, again, a lot of hard work investigating how it can become more active and how it can be better utilised for our community and for our local economy. Right, Ben, can I get you to move on? Pretty please. Now, we're sort of entering this discussion, having done a lot of engagement, a lot of learning, a lot of planning as part of that Future High Street Fund process, building up to the submission in July. Now, one of the things that we did, working with a body called the Onion Collective, did a large amount of community engagement, which led to a series of findings, which can be seen at bit.ly/knowing Bideford. But that also then led into the creation of a theory of change that was approved by Bideford Town Council, and which really should act as a kind of a steer for all of our efforts. And I'm not just talking about Torridge District Council or Bideford Town Council, but working collectively as a holistic community with business, with charities, to really bring the town to life. Interestingly, there's all sorts of points that are already starting to come true on that. It's interesting to see. I'm sure Councillor Christie will smile when I point out 2B.3, parking. Improve parking to be well signed and free for 1 to 2 hour stays. Well, we'll see how those trials go in the near future. So it'd be great if people sort of, if you haven't read this, again, that's available on that bit.ly/knowing Bideford. And it just means that people can all be working towards the same end goals and really helping to create a collective difference. Now, before we sort of move on with Ben's bit, we're going to be aiming to finish by 8 o'clock at the absolute latest. So as I said, thank you so much for being with us on a Tuesday night. And Ben, over to you for some fun.
Thank you very much. Let's hope it's fun. So let's look at some of the vitality and viability work we did last year. So just to sort of recap on it, I was brought in with a colleague, Professor Steve Millington, who is an absolute authority on place and has done lots of work with places all up and down the country. And we were brought in to look at these two concepts, vitality and viability. And it's sort of in very brief terms, vitality is essentially the life of the place, and viability is its ability to be able to attract investment in the long term. So it's a sort of sustainability thing. And what we did as part of that exercise, I don't want to run through it again, many of you would have been there, I know some of you were, was do a SWOT analysis on the place. And I'm particularly interested in looking at the opportunities, and I'm interested in asking you whether or not you feel that these opportunities are still the key opportunities for Bideford, particularly in the post-COVID landscape. So just running through them here, one of the opportunities is space for growth. I think, Chris very ably just took you through some of those there. Isaacs Yard, Brunswick Wharf, there's all sorts of opportunity in all of those. Interesting, I think that the river is another place that can grow in terms of the way that it's used. Enterprising people, not something that comes up a lot, but a really interesting one in Bideford because it is such an enterprising place. There was the idea that maybe there could be a bit a slightly better connection between the sort of supply and demand side of things as far as trading hours are concerned. So, are shops always open when people need them to be open, or are they open at the times when the shopkeepers want them to be open, for instance? Interesting questions around identity, which I want to delve into a little bit further, actually. Short-term parking, obviously, let's hope that that's been resolved in some way. It'd be interesting again to see how that pans out. Are the times right? Are the times of day right? Is 2 hours the right period of time, and are the car parks the right ones? Plan centre employment is another good one, particularly given the issues around youth employment and the opportunities that are around for them. We've spoken already about the river, but the quayside as well. Sounds like there's some interesting problems, given that it's a working quayside, about what you can actually do with that. So maybe there are sort of more structural solutions to that problem. And then finally, make more of that independent retail offer. And one of the, this is so key, and particularly for Bideford, that in many ways, and I did find this as I was talking to people in the town, that there's a sort of sense that Bideford has slightly ducked some of the worst of the post-2008 recession, the out-of-town shopping issues, the internet shopping, and indeed the sort of coronavirus issues, because it's much more independent than this chains. And actually, when we look at what's been going on in Bideford, there is some vacancy, and it really felt to me as though the high street, sort of compared with other places that I've seen, not so bad, but particularly great architecture actually on the high street. But you've got some quite large losses on the high street, which I know that Torridge and others are working in the town to try to backfill. But some fantastic independent shops, two of which are here. One of the sort of very clear messages I got from one of the independents in the town was, having seen independents like this start up, there's a real confidence to start your own place, and it's that sense of confidence to invest in your town that I think is going to really stand you in good stead. So really, really good message there, and really interesting to talk to people that run those businesses. And then just before we turn it over to you, the other issue there is the pannier market, which was mentioned before. Now, one of the sort of prevailing issues that I think was raised before was this idea that nobody walks up the hill to the market. So I've included here this poster for Frome, and in many ways, Bideford and Frome sort of remind me of each other in their sort of independent spirit and their sort of very, sort of forward-thinking spirit and stuff. This is just to remind you that if the offer is right, people walk up the hill. And I know that the town council is working on this at the moment, but lots of ideas around event. The pannier market is an event space, really sort of supported by the craft units on the side there, and that sort of thing. So lots to think about. Now, what I wanted to do is turn it over to you. I've seen that there's quite a lot of chat in the chat. Does anybody, Adrian or Chris, want to start talking us through what's in that? And indeed, does anybody want to raise their hand and talk about some of the issues that we've raised here?
Yeah, Ben, just going through the, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just looking through the chat now. Teresa makes a good point in terms of opportunities. Also, the Bideford investigating, obviously, with things on the cycle routes and the cycle paths, linking Kenmouth Valley with Westwood Hoe, Northern Appledore, and linking the Tarka Trail a bit more. There is some work going on in the background around that. Could be a long process, but work is, again, ongoing with that, being actively pushed, as Councillor Christie says on there. In terms of the hill as well, Joel mentions that is it Belenos is always full, and it's just up next door. I don't, not being a bit of a boy, I'm not sure what that is, but it's obviously, if that's something that's, you make that point of, if people have got a reason to go up that hill, they will go, and that looks like somewhere that's obviously raising that point quite well. Agreed. Pannier market needs to be turned back to a food hub potentially. That's Joanne's point there. We at North Devon Food Co-op working the plan, regenerate the food economy in North Devon. So yeah, some good. Those are the points basically in the chat up till there, Ben.
That is great, thank you. Does anybody want to talk in person about what's going on? Has anyone got their hand up?
It's unusually quiet from this bunch of people in the call. Yeah, I'm not used to most of these people being quiet for this long at all. They must be.
Becky raises it.
I guess one of the other changes that we've seen happening, and I don't know whether this sort of makes a difference in terms of the local economy, but the sort of big news in Appledore about the shipyards. Do we see that as having? I know it's not absolutely next door, but do we see that as having an effect in terms of the money that's flowing into Bideford? And then, of course, the other one is around the issue of the daytime population. So more people working from home. What does that mean in terms of the sort of daytime spend that's available? Will you see people in town a little bit more? Are plans being made in terms of things like retail opening hours or the evening economy that sort of speak to those structural changes that we're seeing in Bideford? Does anyone have any thoughts about that?
I promised Ben that we'd be a lively bunch tonight. Rob, go for it. Come on.
Unmute Rob.
He can unmute himself. Rob, come on.
I don't think he can. I think if you've muted him, you can't.
There we go.
Hello.
There we go.
Down at the holiday park in Westwood Ho, we've already been in contact with the new owners of the shipyard, and they're having a chat with us in about 10 days' time with the idea of they might bring some guys down here from away to stay in the accommodation down here on the campsite with the chalets and things like that out of season. So there might be a little bit of money coming in from these guys, which might come down to start up the yard, which would be nice to get a few extra pennies in the winter. So there'll be some bums on seats around the area, I would have thought. That's all I can say on it, really. But there might happen. It happened before when it was the shipyard. We had lots of people staying in Westwood Ho.
Okay. Good news. When did the shipyard close?
Shut in March, I think it was. But it wasn't. It was busy, years before that. There wasn't much going on in March, I don't think.
Yeah, March 2019.
All right. I've got another question for you that I'm hoping will elicit a little bit of comment. So I was talking before about this issue of identity, and it's particularly interesting in a place like Bideford, which feels to me as though it's got a lot going for it and a lot of sort of very clear assets, but I wonder whether it's got a very clear messaging in terms of what it's saying to the outside world, let's just say. So if you were a complete stranger to Bideford and you came in, what would you make of it? What would you make of its evening uses? What do you think? Would you think it was a city that you'd like to stay in, for instance, a town that you'd like to stay in? If you'd visited it, what do you think its messaging is to the outside world? Does anybody have any thoughts on that one?
Becky. Oh, there we go.
If I was brutally honest, I would say the town doesn't have an awful lot going for it apart from Wetherspoons and obviously Rob's Pub. But it's very dead. It used to be quite lively in the evening. It's not now, obviously, with COVID, but even before. And I think we have too many uncontrolled drunks everywhere, which ruin the area, especially for children. I've got children, and we don't go in Victoria Park because of the drunks, so it's probably not the best message.
Yes, so there's that. It feels that there's a very clear message. There's this thing about the coaches drop off in a certain, all drop off on the sort of quayside basically. You have to
by Jubilee Square.
Sure, and then you have to run the gauntlet if you're coming into town sort of through them, and it's not the best first impression, is it?
No.
So that's interesting to think about the evening economy as well. So there's that thing about
Ben, I'm just going to. We've got Teresa and I think Joel have also raised their hands about that last point. Teresa, go for it.
Yes. just thinking about first impressions driving in from Barnstaple, past the Royal Hotel, it would be so much better when Brunswick Wharf is developed. The actual first impressions will be so much improved, because when you come in now to see those broken down buildings with the ivy gradually growing all over them, it's just terrible, really, really poor impression. So, the sooner, from my point of view, the sooner Brunswick Wharf can be developed, the better.
Would you say, Teresa, that's actually sadly the case from most directions when you approach Bideford at the moment?
Yes. I suppose it is really coming down Clovelly Road. Well, no, yeah. coming down Hayward Road is quite nice. Yeah.
Okay, right. I'm aware that Joel's been waving his hand both digitally and in person. Go for it, Joel.
I just wanted to pick up that's something, people that choose to drink on the street is an issue that we need to be dealing with as Bideford and Torridge, and giving people an opportunity to, an alternative to choosing to drink. Life's all about choices at the moment. They're choosing to drink on the street, possibly because there's no other alternative or no other options for them. They are people, they're not just drunks or street drinkers. And we need to provide these people with opportunity and training, or some kind of neurological development, because they may be neurologically diverse as well. So we need to look at this as it's part of our town. That is part of our town. That they vote for councillors, they vote for politicians, they have exactly the same rights as all of us, and we need to make sure that they're included.
I think it's a really interesting point, Joel, in terms of the interconnection between something like addiction, then sort of mental health, homelessness, general well-being, and employment opportunities. So it is about how we create a more holistic town that is compassionate, but also has high standards. David, over to you.
Okay, good evening. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to sort of bring up you're talking about the opportunities of Appledore and Westwood Ho, right next door, because we've got festivals. Appledore, it does have quite a thriving sort of nightlife here normally, and then also you've got Westwood Ho as well with the beach and that sort of connectivity, and to have those two locations so close to Bideford, I think is a real opportunity. Teresa sort of mentioned about developing the cycle route, but I think there's a way that, we are so close to one another, Northam, Appledore and Westwood Ho, that there ought to be a way of us being able to benefit from one another and support one another, because I think that, we thrive when, Northam and Appledore and Westwood Ho thrive when Bideford thrives. And I just think that there are opportunities there for us to develop, so that we bring a lot of visitors to come to Appledore and to Westwood Ho, but they also could go in and do shopping and use Bideford much more as a sort of another place to visit, shop, and entertain.
And I think, David, that was exactly the kind of the rationale to a certain degree behind a lot of the Isaac's Yard proposal as the Future High Street Fund. It's about an interaction between the three locations, rather than just seeing them all in isolation. I'm aware that Peter's been waiting very patiently. Thank you, Peter. And then I'm also aware that Shirley has as well.
Right. I'll come in now then. Yeah, I'm just going back a bit actually. When we were asked what do we think people's first impressions of Bideford are, I can actually remember mine, because I turned up in 1976 and I could have lived anywhere in North Devon, and I went around all the places, and I turned up in Bideford and thought, this is the place I want to live, because firstly the river, it was just stunning, and the bridge, but Bideford itself was quirky. It's not a clone town like so many others. I mean, Barnstaple could be anywhere now, literally anywhere in Britain. Bideford is still very much itself, and that's something I think we need to actually build on. Partly our architecture, partly our history, I will just mention the nighttime economy. Nighttime economies come and go. I expect Rob Braddock will agree to that. Sometimes they are up, sometimes they're down. People are very fickle of where they go. Brunswick Wharf, I think Teresa raised, Brunswick Wharf, we were due to have the plans in back in May. Now, I know COVID has obviously interrupted all that, but it wasn't that long after the lockdown. So we're not quite certain what's happened to those plans. I know there's been some sort of public consultation, but we're still waiting to see what is actually planned there. I know there have been artist impressions and so on, but we are still waiting for the actual plans themselves. Thank you.
Shelley.
Thank you. Just to say that in terms of first impressions, I used to, when I was a kid, I mean, I didn't live around here, and we used to come down on holiday to Cornwall, and always arriving and seeing the estuaries and seeing the boats on the rivers, and hearing the sounds, and every time I come over the new bridge and look down at the river either direction, I just have to pinch myself to think I'm so lucky to live somewhere that brings back all those wonderful memories of going on holiday as a child. And don't want to wax too lyrical about it, because obviously there's a lot of issues, but I just think we are blessed with some of the things in our surroundings, as Peter has said about the river and everything. I think we've got to make more of the river somehow, but also blessed with Westward Ho and Northam, etc., just outside our town. And I just think somehow we've got to hold on to that and make the most of that and remember those. I mean, I take the point about if you come into Bideford a different direction and everything, but and I also do take the point about issues with certain people in the town and things like that. But equally, when you go in the park, I mean, I've been in the park and we have relatives from elsewhere in the country, and they come down, and I know it won't be this year, but they use the paddling pool and they just say, this is amazing, this is fantastic, what a great facility. You've got to hang on to all this. And then walking along the quay, they love it. And I know there's a lot of negatives, and but I just think we've got to hold on to all those good things and make more of them. Thank you.
Very well said. Joe, I'm going to come to you in a second, but I'm aware that Bert hasn't spoken yet, so I'm going to leap over you to Bert, pretty please.
Hello, can you see me?
We can't see you, Bert, but we can hear you nice and clearly.
Right, let me see.
Yeah, there we go.
Now we can see you.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just living here, really. I live in Westward Ho, and I've lived near Bideford for the last 15 years or so. And I'm aware a bit of it has challenges, but I agree with quite a lot of the other speakers that the town has got amazing assets. Just having been one of the major ports in England, centuries ago, it's still a working port, and I'll come back to that. What I haven't quite heard yet is that a bit of it now has two town centres essentially, Atlantic Village, now called Affinity. Partly because it's so easily accessible, by cars, and that won't go away, and having been in the past, which I now disagree with, campaigned against the new Princes Hay development in Exeter, I'm aware that most larger national chains need larger premises. So a bit of a town centre hasn't got that, and I'm sad to hear that Amanco is gone, but it's one of the last, as far I'm aware, national chains. Is probably not what we can aim for, but a bit of it has the possibility of being an incredibly attractive place to visit for summer visitors, as well as for people from further away living within Devon. And it doesn't meet all of those attractive factors. And I'll get a bit more concrete. I don't know how other town centres that deal with similar problems deal with it, and I'm aware that it probably requires funding as well. But a SWAT team, or fast response team to shops that, or premises that look drabby, that look bad, sometimes owners, that struggle or whatever in a town centre need a bit of help or a bit of reminder, just a reminder that everybody can see, that their premises look bad. If all premises in the town look good, or even if they're vacant, are filled as quickly as possible, it really helps, because once you get an air of despondency or, this town is down at heel, it stops visitors from coming, whether they're local or visitors from during the summer season. Apart from that, I agree with Peter Christie about the park, and the idea of parking is really important, because people love just dropping off and not paying that £1 or £2, and not everybody wants to walk a long way. I'm really excited about the possible plans of creating a new hub between All Helen Street and Mill Street, which is, but please don't turn it into a Green Lane shopping centre. Like in Barnstaple, there are historic features there.
I promise.
Historic walls. And but the potential is amazing. But you still need people to spend their pounds. Then I've just got two clear blue thinking ideas, and the first one may be financially and I may be shot down on. But it's fantastic that Bideford is still a working town, a working port. But how much money does it actually bring in during high tides to get the occasional big ship in? You've got a very busy high street plus a quay that is basically a parking spot. It's our biggest asset. If we're going to be a tourist town, it needs to be attractive. There could be cafes there with sidewalks and outdoor eating and drinking. And the last one, and that's ultimate blue sky thinking, is I'm not sure the high street needs to be have cars in it, but I've been to Hong Kong years ago, and there's a very high part of the island of Hong Kong which is lovely, but it's hard to reach. Reminds me a bit of the Penny Market, and it's got an escalator. And there are a few other towns in the world that have an escalator.
Barcelona is another one.
Which one?
Barcelona, up to the Sagrada Familia.
I know we probably haven't got the funding, but it's a blue sky idea. Why not have an escalator to the Penny Market and connect the two places that way? Thank you.
Okay, I'm aware. Joel, can you go for a quick one and then on to Sadie, please?
Yeah, just briefly, I was going to say a bit more, but I'll keep it brief. Everyone keeps talking about the river and coming back to boats and, maritime history. At one point, we were the second port to London. I just don't understand why we don't celebrate that with instead of, building flats, let's build a museum. Let's have some gig building colleges. Let's build boats in conjunction with the boatyard down the road, and let's link it all with water taxes. Why not? Let's get the ferry back from Ilfracombe to Wales. Let's get boat building. Let's do it.
Right. On to Sadie, please, and then I'm aware Joanne's been waving her hand as well. Sadie, where have you gone? Oh.
Hello.
Hey, Sadie. We can see you, we can hear you. Go for it.
Yeah. Actually, what Joel said was what I was going to say, actually. So, yeah, we need to make the most of our river. It's beautiful. It's not made enough of at the moment. Currently, we've got a couple of rowing clubs that use it. It would be lovely to have some kind of water sports facility dealing with all the history of our town, which is amazing. And we have got so many things that, kids and grown-ups locally don't know about our history here. Really, if we could tie it all together, the beautiful scenery, the beautiful river, the beautiful buildings in the town, we'd have such an amazing, we've just got such a lot to offer. And I agree with Peter as well that we have a quirky Bideford town centre, and I like that. You don't want to have all those big, like Costas and things coming into our town. We need to be Bideford, and we've already got a lot to offer: history and river and the whole thing. But and also the pannier market, I think also needs to be utilised more. Sorry, I'll be quiet now.
Sadie, no, feel free. So for me, I think there's a couple of really great points there to pick up on. Quirky makes people smile. And
Yeah.
for me, as someone who's lived in Bideford for 15 years, Bideford is a town that likes to smile. The people like to smile. It should be a real central point of who we are and what we're selling, that actually it's a relaxed, fun, kind place to be. In terms of the history of the town, I think we'd all agree that the museum, sort of squashed into the top of the Burton, has got loads of great stuff, but doesn't necessarily engage through that. I know that they've been doing some work on it, but actually within the Isaac's Yard proposals, that to a certain degree, and Peter's been involved in these conversations as well, was one of the driving forces of having that cultural sort of anchor to really celebrate in an engaging, occasionally technology-driven way to bring a lot of that to life.
Well, also, if you can bring schools in and groups, you know, as a school teacher myself, there's no way that we can really bring in a massive group to the Burton Art Gallery as much as we'd love to. And once you can tie in all those things, schools and people that enjoy the river, then, you know,
we've got a lot of things going for us.
You've got people coming back over and over,
Completely. Joanne, thank you so much for waiting. Oh, can't hear you. Oh no, frustrating. Yeah, can hear you very quietly.
Oh, okay, closer. Better?
A tiny bit, go for it. I think we can all just about strain in and hear you.
I'll talk louder then. I wanted to raise the point, is there anything that needs to change for the town to thrive? And I think that absolutely we need to, we're talking about investment here, we're talking about spending money on the town to bring people in, but actually we have money in the town that goes out of the town. We have money that we bring in that goes out of the area, and that goes out of the area in the form of supermarkets. We have large supermarkets that take millions and millions of pounds out of this area every year. And one of the things the North Devon Food Co-op is looking at is how to keep that money in this area, how to keep it in the town, how to invest in businesses, how to grow our food economy, and how to use our resources to keep growing Bideford and the other towns. So we're looking at not just sustainability here, but regeneration. So we're looking at regenerative farming, at growing the food that we want to eat. And we're doing it collectively. So we're using our money as we would go to a shop or a supermarket, and we're going direct to the farmer and saying, can you grow this because this is what we want to eat? And we're looking at putting money up front, using the power of the collective to support growers to grow their business. Our biggest challenge is access to land. We've got the growers, we've got identified the people that we want to work with, and we've identified a lot of people that want to come on board with a co-op. There'll be lots of spin-offs with this. It's not just talking about food, but anything that we can grow and that we can utilise in this area will potentially be a business. So you're talking about using shops, but actually we've got all the expertise we need here, and we actually have the money between us to make this work. What we're trying to do is just to pull it all together. So we are looking at certain things like educating people around food and where your food is grown and how you use food for health. We're looking at affordability, how we can cut out certain steps of the food process so that we can make good food more affordable and more accessible. We're talking about having a year-round economy so that we're just not relying on tourism the whole time, but actually we're self-sustaining. And also attracting funding, because a food co-op is a non-profit, and we should be able to attract various grants. So this is about localism. This is about us supporting us by spending our money with the local businesses who are growing food and growing their own products here. And we're right at the very start of creating our vision. We'd like to use the pannier market not for a market, but actually as a click and collect point. So farmers and the food growers have told us the model that they want to work. They don't want to do deliveries. They don't want to stand at a market stall all day. They want to put their products on a website. We order, click and pay, and they deliver it to one central point and we come and collect it. So that's their preferred model. It saves them time. They know in advance what their orders are going to be, and all the money is handled, via a website.
I'm going to, Joanne, It sounds really exciting. One thing I'm going to chip in as part of the Future High Street Funds. I put this into the chat because people often laugh at me when I start saying this. One of the inspirations for the sort of food elements of the Isaac's Yard was a place called Mercato Metropolitano in Elephant and Castle in London, who really, it's not just about the great locally sourced produce, but it's about how you educate through that food, both for kind of the adult community and for school sort of children's, to make sure that actually that message just becomes completely embedded within the local community. And sort of Mercato even kind of do summer programs for students on free school meals, for example. So it's that sense, going back to Joel's point earlier on about that compassionate society. Okay, Joel, over to you. Thank you, Joanne. That was really interesting. Also, go for it. Go for it, Joe.
I was just going to say, education will be part of the co-op, because we've got people who are growing, and obviously they'll be seasonal, and we'll need to educate people about the best way to eat seasonal food. Brilliant.
Thank you very much. Joel, did you want to chip in?
Yeah, just quickly, just following on from Joe, I think that's a really great idea. But it always struck me that we live in, we're surrounded by a huge farm. And whenever I teach in schools around the area, if the food comes from, probably a weird dusty warehouse in Germany somewhere, it's like, well, why can't we supply our own schools and our own, why is there not a GCSE in farming that we do in North Devon, or BTEC, or, well, I'll say that, but I'm sure there is a BTEC actually at the Agricultural College, but why is there not a GCSE in farming? We need to really concentrate on, we should be measuring our food miles in meters, really, here, shouldn't we?
I know it was actually something that Route 39 were looking into partnering with Dutchy on, and the Department for Education got slightly funny about it. So, because again, at the moment, we send a lot of our young people off to Dutchy or to Bicton. But I don't think food education is coming back into schools far more than it used to. It kind of died away. It's now a far more prominent thing. I think I'm reluctant to start going into the world of education too much, because I think it'd be useful to really focus on town centre for now, but it's all interconnected. Ben, I'm aware that you've got a fair bit to get through. Whilst Ben's talking, can we please make sure we carry on these conversations through the chat, which is merrily kind of ticking away in the corner of my screen. Ben,
I was just going to ask, actually, Adrian, do you mind giving us a quick sort of précis of the chat? What's going on?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm just making sure. Yeah, I'm unmuted. No, that's a good point. There's a lot of positives. Basically around the structure of the town and the appearance of the town. Definitely wanting to keep Bideford's quirkiness going on. It's really important to people. Ideas potentially around the museum going to where the library is, and that can create a big space for the town museum. Other bits as well, but trying to keep the money, the Bideford pound in Bideford. Lots of Just Eat, Airbnb, that sort of thing that disappears out of the town. Having those ideas to try and keep that spent within the town as well. Also, a bit interesting about M&Co shutting and being a big space, and a lot of the shop owners being obviously the private owners, but actually they potentially don't live here, which could be potential problem with the appearance of the shop upkeep then, if you like. So maybe to look at something, look at that, and if that needs addressing, maybe. Yeah, really, that's pretty much it. But all positive on the group chat from here. Things about sculptures being put up as well, which is all good for the town. So yeah, that's the update on the chat there, Ben.
Brilliant, thanks so much. All right, I'm going to take it really negative now. I'm really sorry, I feel quite bad about it. I wanted to talk about coronavirus, particularly, and what's happened economically. Obviously, this is something that we've all seen and got used to seeing over the last few months, and sort of on a national stage. And what I'd like you to be thinking about as I go through this is sort of how you would compare Bideford to what's been happening nationally. So obviously businesses had to close and remain closed for some time, although certainly in Bideford, we've seen lots of businesses staying open that had a sort of, that were an essential retailer. But what we've been seeing is a decline for some time, where in 2018 and 2019 we were gradually seeing job losses and store closures going up. Now, as a conservative estimate, we're now forecasting 235,704 job losses in 2020, with 20,620 store closures. Now, I'm quite struck by the gentleman before, I can't remember who it was, I'm so sorry, about this idea that Bideford really should be attracting more chains, and that it's not really attractive to chains. I think you've dodged a bit of a bullet there, as far as I'm certainly in terms of the national example. It has been protected in many ways, because a lot of chains have started moving out, both through the evening economy, the restaurants, the pubs, but also the shops as well. And actually, I think we've seen far fewer store closures in Bideford than we have on a national stage. Just looking at some of the sort of key industry areas and policy areas that I've been looking at as far as the national picture is concerned, hospitality has been a really interesting one. It's been quite a roller coaster. It was in a load of trouble before anyway. Labour shortages, spiralling rents, bad management. The sort of threat of Brexit on Labour was a real problem for the industry. It's going to be very interesting to understand how it's going to adapt post-Brexit, post-COVID. Eat out, help out. Certainly when I was in Bideford, meant there wasn't a table to be found in town. Maybe that means there's more capacity. Certainly a lot of those restaurants are now looking to expand into September. Social infrastructure is a really interesting one, and very, very well made point about the fact that there are all sorts of different people in town, some of whom have got all sorts of different kinds of issues, substance abuse problems, mental health issues. They are all part of that Bideford family. I wonder whether there's this issue now around the money that's around to be able to deal with these sorts of issues, but also whether there's we've seen this resurgence of the notion of community, I suppose, and people have been helping each other a lot more. They're vulnerable neighbours, and volunteering and that sort of thing as well. I mentioned a little bit before about this sort of change in our working patterns. Think about it in terms of Bideford. Lots more people working from home, cash-strapped companies, cutting back on office space. There's not loads of office space in Bideford. I would predict that a lot more people leave Bideford than come to Bideford from outside to work, particularly in offices. So this changes our demand patterns. It's also true of the population. There will be changes in the population, maybe a little bit less so in North Devon, both at the older end and the younger end, as a result of lockdown. And also just thinking about tourism, there's no getting over it. It's been a really interesting year actually for Bideford. The airlines have obviously not been running, but you've really seen a lot of staycationers in town. How do things change next year? What did 2020 ultimately look like? Was that made back from people that are visiting from the domestic market? And are we going to lose some visitor economy businesses, or do you think that it will still survive? Think about that in terms of the action plan. Now, I just wanted to run through, I haven't got loads of time, but I just wanted to run through how some of these places, particularly small towns, are dealing with recovery. And there are just some examples here. The first is this idea of the virtual high street. So Northallerton, Saltaire, Kendal are all using this Shop Appy virtual high street app, which is really about taking the high street online. Those places where there are lots of good independents, but also where you'll see shoppers who essentially go from one shop to the other to get their daily shop or their weekly shop. These sorts of interventions work really well. You can order it all online and then go in and collect it. Really good way of sort of tying that sort of virtual and sort of real high street together. Loyal Free, which is being used by Welwyn Garden City, Lanark and Ulverston, they're they're quite interesting as well. It's a bit less about click and collect, and a little bit more about tourist information, town trails and heritage. And also they do loads of stuff on footfall as well. So footfall data, they're really good on data. So it's definitely one to consider, I think, for Bideford, especially given you've got all of these issues around, all of these positives around heritage and history and trails and that sort of thing. And a lot of
explorations are going on into a couple of those at the moment. So
fantastic, yeah, lots of places to discover in Bideford. So yeah, absolutely have a look at those. This is Manchester, so obviously way bigger than Bideford, but really interesting campaigns. I know that Plymouth, no, I'm so sorry, Falmouth, which is obviously much smaller than Plymouth, did some really interesting campaigns, which is around, you know, welcome back. There are all sorts of things that you can do to welcome people back. My door's just gone. I'm going to ignore it. And then there's this issue around encouraging new businesses. So obviously you do have some vacancy, and Ozer Street has done a really interesting project around it. So it's got a fair bit of money together actually. It's about doing vacant units up. You certainly can interface with your landlords to do that, and then filling them with meanwhile spaces. So this is really about encouraging enterprise. And sort of working with local educational establishments and others for those people that want to start their own businesses in town. So there's real opportunities there. We talked about this idea about local economic power for those people that are working from home. Those of you that have got kids, I feel for you if you've been working from home over the last few months. It cannot have been easy. Where those offices are disappearing, some people will really have no choice but to come into town and work. And if you think about the sort of agglomerative effects of people working together, what that means is that people, you know, will be found in the same place. And economically, that's really good for a place, because not only there are the impacts of them going off and getting the sandwich from the local sandwich shop, but actually they're learning from each other. And that's what's really good about local work hubs. Finally, well, not quite finally, but community wealth building, which absolutely speaks to that model that Joanne was talking about before, this idea of local wealth creation and keeping money in the community. So the Preston model is a really interesting example of this, and it looks at these 4 key principles, essentially using wealth that's already in your community and keeping it in your community, particularly those local institutions, the local authorities, housing associations, others that have got spending power, keeping that wealth in the community. Using the workforce to make sure that they're paid properly and to encourage them to both save and spend locally, using credit unions and other institutions. Using land and property in the right ways. So, you know, where the local authority, I mean, you know, CPO compulsory purchase order is a sort of power that's available to local authorities. But actually, there are other ways of being able to acquire land and use it for the benefit of local wealth creation. And then finally, economic democracy, which is really about local governance models that encourage that local spend. Community property trust is one that's really popular in North Devon. So, you know, building housing locally and that sort of thing. Just to go on to a report by Bill Grimsey, who used to be the CEO of Iceland and Wix, and it's a fantastic, you've read it, haven't you, Chris?
It's a really, it sounds strange, and please feel free to accuse me of being geeky, but it's actually a really enjoyable, uplifting read. Good.
It's really interesting. I mean, it's not uplifting in the beginning because Bill Grimsey puts his hands up and says, "I ruined the high street, and I'm really sorry." And I mean that as a sort of mea culpa is a really interesting one. You know, they were absolutely part and parcel of creating these claim towns, of sort of bringing people out of town shopping centres and that sort of thing. And so his response to all of that is a lot that's been talked about tonight. The first is, again, Joanne, you were talking about this idea of localism, absolutely bang on. You know, you need local governance relationships that mean that people are in much, much greater control of the picture of their place. The second is leadership, and I know that Bideford is totally full of really, really great leaders. You might, some of them are on the call, I know, and some of you might think it's always down to me, but actually what leadership inspires is other people to do it as well. And so town councils, district councils need to empower those leaders to go out and recruit people that are able to make a real difference in Bideford, and I know that lots of that's going on. This final one, I mean, you might be a bit anti the fewer cars thing, but certainly you'll be pro the green space thing. Let's see how the parking thing works. But what Bill is saying here is that towns, cities, everywhere needs to think a little bit more about how their spaces are configured to really encourage people to stop, enjoy, dwell. I think one of the things I was told about the high street is that it has to have spaces that allow people to stop directly out of the shop, pop in, buy their stuff, and then drive away again. I don't know about you, that's not what I'd want for my town. I want people to stop, I want people to dwell, I want people to have a cup of coffee, spend a bit more money, and enjoy the sort of pace of life. I sort of think that's what Bill is saying.
Yeah. Ben, there's only one disappointment I've got with Grimsey, and that's the fact that I tweeted him before our Future High Street Fund submission to get his thoughts, and he just blanked me. He's been a bit of a busy boy.
I don't think it was personal.
I'm aware, Ben, that
yeah, we've got lots in the chat actually as well.
There's lots in the chat, and Joel's been sat very patiently with his hand
I'm
up.
terribly sorry, Joel. I've got everyone. I can't see anyone, so please go ahead.
I've got 3 points, but I'll be really brief. The first is maybe a Bideford pound could be a winner. Brixton's got one, Bristol's got one, and our name is very similar. But it works. It works. It keeps cash local. You're not allowed to spend it in the big chains.
Interestingly, it worked briefly in Totnes and then didn't work. So it's a case of making sure that anything we do has that sustainable long-term impact. Definitely. And I think that's key.
Definitely.
Sorry, point number two.
So the Brixton pound and the Bristol pound. So I used to run business improvement districts in London, and so I was very closely connected with the Brixton pound. And now I live in Bristol, and I'm closely connected with the Bristol pound. And I'm afraid they're both slightly on the skids. But what I would say is that a place like Bideford is, if it's ever going to work, it's going to work in somewhere that has loads of independents and lots of people supporting them. So don't give up on that idea at all.
Second point, really briefly, is that Paris is now looking at a system where you can get everything you need within a 15-minute walk.
Yeah. Joe, that was absolutely integral to our Future High Street Funds. The concept of a 15-minute neighbourhood, cool. Whereby you can get everything you want in terms of shopping, leisure, well-being opportunities, and your work, sort of high-quality work, within 15 minutes of where you live.
And I guess that would be for Londonderry and east of the water as well.
Yeah, and especially if we then start working on things like e-bike opportunities and improved cycling opportunities, which then expands that sort of radius and really means that people can access that 15-minute neighbourhood.
And also, I was just wondering, do you or Ben or Adrian have any information on the positive effects of educational facilities within a town centre? Because I would love to see, we've got the Burton is, it's one of the best galleries in the country that we've got in Bideford, and to have that art college kind of not being an art college opposite one of the best galleries in the country is just heartbreaking every time I walk past it. Especially, and I'm an art teacher as well, so it's double heartbreaking. But that place could, we've got an amazing, again, we've got a maritime history, we've got an amazing artistic history as well here in the town, and that's something that again needs to be celebrated, I think. And I'm sure if you've got some crazy 18, 19-year-old art students, they're going to bring a lot to the town. I think they really would. And boat building students.
Yeah. Victoria, I'm going to agree that kind of the sense of having an app to bring not only modernity, but linking different strands is going to be really important. But what we also need to make sure is that we get it right when we do it so that it is holistic. Right. Ben, back to you.
Well, so I've seen that we've got 43 in the chat. So Adrian, do you want to give us a quick run through?
Yeah, there's just some general conversation going on about again going back to the locality of our food that's being produced and how we can potentially see that being used within our towns, for people coming in and purchasing that as a food hub. For that was quite a bit of the conversation, but also on transport and local links from our villages, and maybe some work needed around that as well, in where they go and drop off and using those areas a little bit better potentially. But yeah, mostly around having a food hub being such a great idea. And then obviously Victoria, Chris has picked up on that about the app, and we know that Hamish has been doing some investigations around that, potentially as an idea as well, and how we can bring the high streets to the living room, but keep the pound within Bideford as well. So yeah, that's mostly what that conversations are about there, Ben.
Brilliant, thank you very much. It's really, really interesting. Actually, this is very rich conversation. It does actually remind me slightly of, I mean, so when we're talking about demand patterns, really, that 15-minute city thing is absolutely bang on for that. The Bideford pound thing is absolutely bang on for that. And then also that comment about making greater economic connections between the outlying areas of Bideford and the villages and stuff. And actually technology allows you to do that, and is increasingly allow you to do that with transport, so sort of bus networks, so community bus networks that are run by algorithm. So you can order them up like you would a cab, and it works out, you know, the sort of best, most efficient way to get between those people that have ordered them up.
Ben, it's really disappointing that someone who was on last night's call and will be on tomorrow night's call is an expert on that, but she had to send her apologies for tonight, who works at Devon County Council. So there are, within the district, investigations into that.
Brilliant. Okay, really good for particularly for rural areas. So just talking about demand patterns, just looking at this slide here, obviously we've got people working from home. I spent a number of different estate agents in Bideford when I was down, and they were all extremely positive, but and I don't know whether this will fill you with horror, but lots and lots of inquiries from people moving from cities into North Devon. So they're really, you know, you will see a change, I think. Who knows whether these inquiries, you know, ended up coming to anything, but you'll see a change in people coming from outside. They were saying it used to be retirees, now it's younger people with families really interested in changing that lifestyle, and also suddenly aware that you don't need to be tied to any specific place. So let's see what that does in terms of working patterns. Broadband is another really interesting one. Communities are doing for themselves these days. There's a really interesting example of that in Lancashire. There's a sort of community broadband sort of build it yourself network called Barn. They literally dug their own trenches through the field and now have one of the fastest fibre networks in the country.
Thankfully, Ben, Bideford is scheduled to have full fibre across the entire town by the end of 21.
Brilliant, good to hear, good to hear. Retail is, you know, obviously there's retail demand patterns are changing. There's been a real resurgence of grocery. There's a lot of revised opening hours. I've seen it in Bideford anyway, that blending with online and that support for independence. So that's good as well. And then we spoke already about rural housing.
Right. Ben, could I just ask, I know that Kay earlier on wanted to pick up on a point about sort of social issues within the town. Kay, could I get you to...
Yeah.
Hi, thank you for letting me talk. I can't stay on long. I've got kids in the background, first day back at school. A few of you might know me, so I'm down as Kay Morris on here, but I'm Councillor Kay Corf on Bideford Town Council. So my job is working with vulnerable people for a local charity called Encompass, and I actually manage an 8-bedroom shared supported accommodation project in Bideford, central Bideford town, for people that were homeless and have had or got issues such as alcohol, substance misuse, mental health and things like that. So I was really, really wanted to come on and chat to you guys. I'm aware that earlier in today's meeting before I came on, that the people that drink on the quay were discussed. I don't know if that was quite brief. I know that at the last town council meeting, there was a conversation as well about them being an issue. Unfortunately, I wasn't at that meeting. I'll be quite honest with you guys, it is something that I'm really, really passionate about. I mean, people are my life, and supporting people that don't have a voice in our community and making sure that we can get as many people accommodated as possible. One of the points I really wanted to bring this evening is, and I'm not sure if everyone's aware of this, the people that are on the quay drinking are not breaking any laws. There's no I don't know what the word is, but there's no reason why they can't drink. I've spoke to Dean at Torridge, you know, and I know for a lot of people they say it can be quite intimidating and it can be quite unsightly, but they are members of our community as well. And these members of our community are the ones that have been hit hardest through the pandemic. They were struggling anyway, and these people are struggling even more now. And, you know, I am going to be really careful because, like I said, I am quite passionate, but I know each and every one of these people really well. So I know their backstory, I know their history, and I know their struggles. And I've lost my bit of paper, I'm always doing that, but I wrote something down the other night to actually say at the next town council meeting, but I'll try and remember some of it tonight. And quite often in my job, you know, we have a lot of people that are labelled as problems, and it's not until the labelled and the labeller can come together and talk about that perceived problem that actually we very quickly realise that it's not really a problem at all, and that by working together we can look at the perceived problem and work through it. Does that kind of make sense? I don't want you to think I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, but you know, these are people in our community. They're people's brothers, sons, uncles, fathers, nephews, cousins, friends. And you know, I know for a fact that if they had an alternative other than to sit there and drink and be perceived as unsightly and causing an issue, then they would. But for them, that is their world right now. At Encompass, we are quite effectively working with people in that situation. Unfortunately, due to obviously funding issues and resources, we can't get to everybody. But you know, these guys and girls are still going to be there when it gets colder, you know, when things get harder for all of us financially and with job issues and accommodation. And I just wanted to kind of come here tonight and be a bit of a voice for them, so we can just all remember that they're struggling as well.
I think it's
if
really
anyone's
important.
got any questions, that would be great.
Kate, I think it's really important that we remember kind of throughout this process that what we're talking about is opportunities for all. That what we can't do is say, right, we're going to invest massively in our town and create opportunities for some. That this is about, for example, how do we create better employment routes? How do we create a more supportive society to catch those people who've fallen through gaps? How do we make sure that there's improved housing? How do we make sure that we have environmental aspects very much at the heart of what we're doing? Be that kind of either in plastic free or be it in terms of the carbon message. How do we make sure that kind of our young people are provided for both through things like and old in terms of transport opportunities and leisure activities, because our young people often get stigmatized because they're hanging around with nothing to do. Well, it's because there's nothing to do. So we need to make sure that we're not having a monodimensional conversation, but actually we are broad reaching. So I think I'm aware that we're kind of almost running out of time, Kay, and I'm aware that kind of you and I have often talked in the past about this one for a long period of time. So I'm sort of, I'd like to give Ben the opportunity just to carry on for a moment, but please, I know Sadie's already put a comment in the chat for you. It might be worth just kind of using that chat function for a few minutes and really kind of passing some messages around. Is that okay, Kay?
Yeah, just very quickly, and not in this meeting obviously, but if anyone wants to get in touch with me, because at Encompass we've got lots and lots of different projects and we've got lots of statistics and information about all those things you've just said, Chris, about the young people and
Yeah.
employment, housing. So I think we could really collectively work together on that.
Yeah.
If you
I'm
needed
aware,
further information.
Kay, your contact details are all on the Bideford Town Council website,
Yeah.
I believe. So if anyone's interested in getting in touch with Kay, then her contact is all through there. Okay.
Cheers.
A pleasure, absolute pleasure. Ben, where we've got sort of about 10 minutes, are there any things that you want to steer us towards discussing?
Well, only just to sort of, thanks very much for that, Kay. It was really interesting and important thing to say there. I just wanted to talk about the sort of context of the action plan itself. Obviously, it needs to fit in as much as possible with the sort of strategic plans above it in the hierarchy. I know that the town council has plans as well. This really just needs to be something which is almost like a list of things that have been sort of mentioned over the time, just to sort of get it down on paper and provide you with a bit of a direction of travel. You know, these are going to be short, medium, long-term things that should be achievable. But I suppose the focus needs to be on what the community can achieve for itself. So a lot of the examples that I've used have really been about, you know, rather than sort of big infrastructural spending, they've been about, you know, the community getting together and deciding that they want to do a specific thing in their town. And I know that Bideford is really good for that, because, you know, I've met lots of people in the town, and I know that lots of you work together and stuff. So the focus of it, but I won't leave out sort of bigger infrastructural plans. Now, I just very quickly wanted to run through what is above it in the hierarchy, so particularly the North Devon Recovery Plan.
Ben, apologies, before we kind of move on to that last bit, Sadie, can I just come to you as the final hand that's up? Sorry, Ben.
Yeah, sorry, I'll be really brief. I just wanted to say how lovely it was to hear from Kay and all the work that's been done, obviously, around town for people that are struggling. Also, I was just going to say that, you know, also, there are lots of teenagers hanging around as well, and those, I think, as part of this, I think we really must be careful not to leave those people behind. It's all too easy to sort of, you know, say that they're intimidating and everything, but I really think that if they could be brought on board, wouldn't that be amazing? Also, with my other hat on, which I forgot to mention earlier, is the sort of plastic-free communities thing that we've been doing around town. Again, we've done a lot of work locally. We're just volunteers. We haven't got an amazing amount of time to go around to each and individual business in town. But I think, you know, saying we were quirky earlier, I really believe that if we can show how differently we can react to things and how we promote sort of maybe the environmental, also how we care for our community, I think that will, I think that could be a really key way of showing how Bideford is very different and could be very different. Also, alongside all this, you know, investment and everything else, and recovering the town, but also remembering the people within it. Does that make sense?
A great place to live, work, and visit, so to speak.
Yeah. But also, you know, caring for those people that need it the most, because it's all too easy to sort of try and push them to the side.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. Right, Ben, over to you. Let's look at that strategic overview for a minute. I think, Sadie, your point there is absolutely superb point to move on. Like,
and I absolutely meets that long-term aspiration of North Devon for that net zero carbon society, that sort of, you know, really looking at, you know, what plastics are being used, biodiversity gain and environmental improvement. So that it's really working. These are some sort of quite general long-term aspirations. But in the meantime, obviously, you know, Chris has talked to you some of the sort of medium-term aspirations around Isaac's Yard and Brunswick Wharf. Changes afoot, and then in the short term, it's about supporting businesses with grants, physical changes to town centres that you've seen, and just sort of helping those businesses recover. So I guess what I'm saying is that the action plan will need to fit in with that, and hopefully they do. Now, just very quickly, in barriers to success, there are three that I see all the time, and I just want these to be in the forefront of your mind as you both read the action plan and go on to suggest things that should go in it. So the first is really around infrastructure. Fantastic news around broadband. That's going to be really up to scratch. Transport, again, you know, we were speaking about that a little bit earlier. I'd really like to hook up with your expert, Chris, if possible, and just start talking a little bit about that. I know that the transport catapult is around as well, and they might be able to test a few things. And training as well, again, back to Sadie's point and Kay's point, this is really about bringing everyone with you. So, you know, there's a real problem in rural communities, Bideford included, with this sort of brain drain of younger people that go off to university. You know, are the jobs available for them? And, you know, Isaac's Yard, other opportunities in Bideford need to be created to encourage those people to stay and be economic units for the town, as well as great citizens. There's always a problem with lack of money. In fact, actually, just on the infrastructure thing, I just want to say one other thing, which has not popped up at all and never seems to pop up when you're talking about Bideford, which is that it's a town completely separated by water, and there doesn't appear to be very much on one side of it. I wonder whether some of you might have some opinions on whether or not there needs, again, this is sort of the 15-minute city thing, you know, whether maybe we need to balance that a little bit. Maybe Brunswick Wharf is an opportunity there, but this is a question about place and identity, and it's a bit of a sort of slightly overbalanced thing. I can see things coming into the chat there, that's good. And so lack of money is a problem. There's issues around local governance and partnerships. I am not massively au fait with how a town council works with a district council, works with a county council, works with a major unitary council, works with a LEP. I bet it's brilliant. I bet it's really easy. But, you know, what are the issues there in terms of sort of sharing visions and that sort of thing? And then there's, in terms of governance, you know, with very, very hyper-local governance, can you get the people involved that need to get involved? It's not just town councillors, fantastic job though they do, but it's like, how do you really engage the citizens? And it sounds to me as though the work that's done recently on Isaac's Yard is a really excellent start to that. Very, very quickly, before we go to some final comments from you, so the action plan is coming to you in about 3 weeks' time, which gives you lots of opportunity to bung in your ideas. This video is going on to the council YouTube and Facebook pages, so an opportunity to be able to contribute there. And you know, obviously, it will all be checked, and we'll look at the chat, and everything will be incorporated as much as possible. But what I want it to do is to be based on evidence. So if you're, you know, if the car parking trial isn't working, or it needs to work in a different way, then I'll bring evidence to say I think it needs to go this way. So it's not all going to be just reading back what your sort of current aspirations are. I want to sort of try to push it forward a little bit as well. I want it to be community focused, as I said before. So this is really around, you know, it's really around what you can do for yourselves rather than necessarily what the councils can do for you. I want it, however, to be complementary to council strategy. There's been a lot of work behind that, and it really is picking up those broader issues around the vulnerable people in society, the big strategic and sort of structural issues around transport and jobs and well-being and skills and that sort of thing. And then finally, I would like it, to challenge you as much as possible to get out there and change things, though it's a great place. Now, just very finally, this is my final slide, which is just that if you want to get in touch with me, I'm very, very happy for you to phone me, please not 4 o'clock in the morning, if you have a eureka moment. But if you've got any ideas, I really, really want to hear them, and I'm very, very happy to talk to you. Do we have anybody else with their hand up, or Adrian, is there anyone in chat that you think needs to be shared with the group?
Sorry, Ben. Not currently. It's slowed down a little bit. A few bits about you talking about the two sides of the river and having a bridge, a pedestrian stroke cycle bridge over the river, which I know we were just saying now. It's been discussed many times before, and you know, and it's currently been looked into again. But it's that trying to join the two up. That's really the conversation at the minute.
I'd also add, Adrian, that it's about building momentum. So rather than just sort of projects in isolation, it's about, for example, getting Isaac's Yard going and then building interest in the attractiveness of the town, coupling that with Brunswick, coupling that with hopefully getting bridge buildings open again. And then you start getting people really interested about what's happening in our town. And then sort of opportunities like cycle bridges start gaining traction and start really becoming possible. Whereas if it's a cycle bridge in isolation, it becomes a lot harder to necessarily invest in and justify. Although sort of, I think most of us on this call would say that actually that would be a fantastic, exciting thing to increase the flow between the town centre, Easter Water, and Brunswick Wharf.
I couldn't agree more. There's that whole thing about momentum. There are not enough hotels in town. The evening economy is not vibrant enough for a town of Bideford's size. But actually, you start somewhere and place things like Isaac's Yard, or even just to have a bit of investment from local independent shops, you will see a change as a result of that. And I see a confidence in Bideford that I don't see in many, many other towns. So I just want to leave you on a reassuring note. You're dead right. Bideford is an amazing place, and I am convinced that it will be absolutely fine in the long term.
What a lovely way to finish the evening.
I might move there.
He did actually say that to me when we were stood looking down over the town a few weeks ago with the sun kind of, as I said, glistening on the river. Admittedly, we couldn't find anywhere to eat, but our town has got a lot going for it, and fingers crossed we're in for exciting times. I'm aware that we're approaching 8 o'clock. I would encourage anyone who's got Victoria. I'm not sure he does say that about all the towns, actually.
I really don't. I promise. Scout's honour.
But I think that please utilise those contact details that Ben's put up. As Ben mentioned, I will be sharing the video of this session onto the Torridge Economic Development Facebook page tomorrow. So if you need to kind of scribble those down and you haven't got a pen now, you can access them from that video. Really, thank you so much for getting involved. I know that we've had various discussions, but it really is about building these discussions and bringing more and more and more people in, so that, as Ben mentioned, we can make sure that it's not just Torridge, it's not just Bideford Town Council, but that our entire community can really start to feel proud and involved in their town. On that note, everyone, thank you so much. Enjoy your evenings, and I look forward to speaking all again very soon.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Ben.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
See you later.